Good afternoon and welcome to the August 19th budget workshop session. Kathleen, if you'll lead us in prayer, please.
Dear Lord, please bless us in our deliberations. Bless our city and all those who work for the city's benefit as staff and as volunteers. Please bless all of our families wherever they are. Bless our university, the faculty, staff, students as we start a new semester and a whole new year. Please bless our state and our nation. And as always, thank you for everything. We know that everything we have is from you, and we are grateful. We ask and pray all these things in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. If you'll stand for the pledges, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, this is a work session, and first item is a presentation by Gallagher regarding employee benefits renewal. Mr. Summers.
Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to go over the employee benefits renewal for the 2025-2026 plan year. So what I'm going to go over first is the claims experience for the past year. Oh, and before I get started, I know that y'all have a lot on your agenda tonight. I was asked to try to keep this around 10 to 15 minutes, so I won't go too fast because I want to make sure everything flows and all the information is given to you like it needs to be, but also want to make sure I pay attention to the time as well. So the first few lines here is your gross medical claims paid for the year. And you're going to see a gross medical claims paid and a net medical claims paid. And the difference is your gross paid for the year less any reimbursements from reinsurance would be your net medical claims paid. And you can see we had a pretty big increase this year on the medical side. The net increase was a little over 30% year over year. On the pharmacy claims paid, it's up around 11.3%, and the biggest majority of that is coming from your specialty drug spend. And I'd even say on the medical side, it's all comes from some larger claims that were paid this year. If you remember me up here last year, there weren't any large claims over $100,000 threshold, and this year there's been a few. And so that's for the main reason for the increase this year in both the medical side and then on the specialty drugs on the pharmacy side. And then you can see the admin and reinsurance costs are actually a decrease this year. So the net overall cost year over year is right at 15%. Then we talked a little bit about large claims. You can see that last year we had the same amount of claims ranging from 50 to 75,000. And then actually our 75 to 100 went down 3 individuals, but then our 100 to 150 are up by 3. And then we did have one large claimant that's over $500,000. So like I said before, the larger claims are making up the difference this year and the increase on the medical side. We do have some good news on the fund balance. The fund balance is continuing to grow, even though we had a year that's been increasing a little bit in claims expense. We're still increasing our fund balance. We're up to a little over $3.3 million as of July 1st. And it's the healthiest it's been since we started tracking this a little over 10 years ago. So we get into some estimated costs for the next year. So the first line item is the contributions from the city and the employees for this particular plan year, 2024 and 2025. The estimated is a little over $3.2 million, and that comes from a budget of 324 employees on the plan, and then the contributions from the employees through their payroll deductions. The expected cost this past year were 3.131, and the maximum was a little over $3.6 million. And over the last 12 months, it's been a little over $3.3 million. So very close when it comes to actually estimating something that's a little over $3 million a year. The estimated funding for the next plan year is a little over $3.2 million. From the contributions from the contributions from the city are a little over 3.2, just about 10,000 more than last year, just because a little bit of changes in the demographics that we had from year over year. And then the estimated cost for the 25-26 plan year is a little under 3.5 million, with your maximum at a little over $4 million. When we get to the actual recommended funding and how much it's going to cost the employees and the city for this next plan year. I will say that since 2022, there's not been any recommendations to raise the cost on this as far as what the city contributes. And this will be the third year in a row that we're actually asking or recommending a small decrease to the dependent rates on the base plan. And actually the last 3 years, there's been a recommendation to lower the rates for dependents. So this year we're going to do the same thing, or the recommendation is do the same thing. You'll see in the base plan offering on the right-hand side, the employee is going from $422 a month to $397 a month. So it's a $25 reduction for anyone that's taken a spouse, children, or family coverage if they're on the base plan. All other coverages, the HR team and the team that we talked to about all the different things as far as rates and plan designs and all, decided that everything else should stay the same this year. But again, I think it's impressive that over the last 5 or 6 years, no rate increases for the employees, and this year, the last 3 years, actually rate reduction. And then we did make one small plan design change. I know when I was up here last year, we talked about out-of-pocket maximums. So we wanted to try the best we could to start to lower those out-of-pocket maximums for employees and their dependents. So this year, we were able to lower the out-of-pocket maximum on the base plan, $1,000 for the individual and $2,000 for the family. And then you'll see the same, little over $1,250 on the buy-up plan and $2,500 for the family. All the other pieces of the plan will stay the same for next year. That's the medical side. Then we get into the dental, which is self-funded. It has been self-funded for many years. So the city of Nacogdoches contributes $30 a month for all 4 tiers, which is the employee side. And then those are the employee contributions of $30.97, $40.80, and $82.02 for family coverages. And recommendation is to not change those either for next year. You can see the contributions, a little over $116,000 for employees from the city. And the contributions from the employees are a little over $62,000 this year, estimated to be around almost $67,000 for next year. So about $183,000 is the proposed or the expected claims for next year in fixed cost. And the overall cost are about the contributions are $183,000. The actual costs are recommended to be about $188,000. This year it's actually been less than that. So the committee felt really good at keeping the rates the same. It wasn't a very large number, and if we went up a couple of dollars, it'd probably get to even. So we decided to leave that alone. There is a fund balance in that as well, or has been. So we'll continue to take a look at that as the years go by. The plan design is staying the same. We did make a change last year to increase the orthodontic maximum to $2,500, and so that's going to continue to stay in place. So no changes to the plan design for the dental insurance. So in summary, the base plan, the monthly rates for the dependents are going to come down $25 if voted on. All other rates for the dental insurance, all the employer-paid products, employer-paid life, disability, and then all the voluntary products, where there's no rate adjustments at all, no increases, and no plan design changes. And again, on the health insurance, we did reduce the out-of-pocket maximums for both plans, and we reduced the base plan dependent rates. We are going to ask that if a spouse is covered or has options to be covered through his or her employer, that should be happening moving forward and not be eligible for the plan. That's pretty standard in the industry. So I hope I kept it under 10 minutes. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer this.
I have just one. What happens to our employees when they retire? Do they go into some other plan? Is there a plan offered to them later?
Yes, ma'am. If they retire and they're under the age of 65, they can stay on this plan. And so it's the exact same plan.
Okay.
And then their rates, the HR would give them their rates to stay on the plan. And then once they reach 65, they would be eligible for Medicare, and that's when they need to go on Medicare.
Okay.
But to answer your question in terms of, is the city paying that after? No.
Okay.
We would need, I have been at cities that have done that, and I think it all comes down again to revenue and what your growth curve would look like in terms of contingent liability.
Okay. Thanks. That was my second question. So-
Yeah, we actually, they're still on the health plan.
Yeah.
Up until age 65, so we would
It
still.
sounds like a great way
We
to
still
do it.
incur the claims, and the claims would be part of the overall expense, but then the city receives more premium than they do if they're a normal or active employee.
My only question. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Jeff,
Okay, thank
very
you,
much.
Council. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mhm.
Okay, next item is presentation and discussion of the proposed fiscal year 2026 annual budget. This is going to be a lot lengthier than Mr. Summers' presentation, and I'll ask you if we can just let Todd go through his presentation, and then if you have any questions, just jot them down, and then we'll go back and we can pick it up from there. But if you just, because we are under a time constraint. So, Todd, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Todd Semino, I'm the interim finance director for the city. Second budget workshop for the city, and we'll just go right to the presentation. Just like last time, these are the priorities and challenges that the city manager has laid out for this budget year. There's no changes here except on this second slide. That last bullet point is new. We'll have a couple of slides towards the end of the presentation to talk about that last bullet point. I'd like to give you an update on sales tax revenue. As you know, this is the second largest source of revenue for the city. It's about a fourth of the revenue for the general fund. And as you can see, for the first time that I can think of, we actually have, our year-over-year change has grown each year, even though the percentage is getting smaller. But the year we're in now is the first time we've actually had a decline in sales tax revenue. It was slightly positive last month, but as you can see, in August, we received 9% less than what we were expecting. So we're hoping that trend doesn't continue because, like I said, this is the second largest source of revenue for the city, so it's pretty important that that continues to grow.
And Todd, let me point out, we're not sure if we're getting, especially, we had late payers, as you know, on the hotel motel side. We don't know if we're having some other issues comptroller-wise. But if you look at October, -7, but December, +6. You had an audit adjustment, which was massive in there, so that's not anything we can do about. But then go down to April and May. So you're negative about the same amount that you're positive. Wild swings. We're kind of, going to be interesting to see what happens in September, if it is tariff-induced or economy-induced, or if it is folks are taking time filing with the comptroller, maybe because they have their own cash flow issues, and even though that's not what they should be doing. But it does appear to be probably third of the year swing about the same amount south to about north, if you really look at the pattern. Probably almost every quarter it seems to be happening. And again, it may be the economic conditions and some kind of internal business decisions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the number one source of revenue for the city, at least for the general fund, is property tax. That's over a third of the general fund's revenue. We didn't have the rates last time we met. We do now, and I told the council that we would propose the voter approval rate, which allows the city to grow its revenues by 3.5%. So As you can see, that voter approval rate is 57.5 cents per $100 evaluation, and it's broken up. 49 cents goes to the maintenance and operation account, which is your general fund. 8 cents goes to your INS account, which is your debt service fund, to obviously fund your debt payments for bond issues. I'd just like to point out a trend going from 2024, let's look at the total tax rate. Going from 2024 to 2026, that increase was 10.1 cents in the property tax. Those same years, 7.3 cents of that increase was because bonds were issued and all approved by the voters of Nacogdoches. So that leaves your general fund property tax rate, which for the citizens, that funds your police, fire, libraries, recreation, et cetera. That increase was only 2.79 cents in the last 2 years. So the majority of this tax rate increase from 2024 to 2026 is debt related, but you can also see we're still much below the total tax rate in years 2020, 2021, and 2022. Now, citizens might be asking, well, how's this going to affect my property taxes this year? So the way I can answer it is last year, I don't have the numbers this year, but last year, the average residential household value was $165,000. For that same $165,000 house, your property taxes will increase $78 a year, which is equivalent to $6.50 a month. I'll also note in fiscal year 2029, if everything stays the same, this tax rate will probably, for your debt, will come down 1 penny, because I think in 2025, the city financed one of its fire trucks through a tax note, and that tax note will be paid off in 2029. On that front, y'all probably seen your budget that we'll talk about in the regular meeting. There's another fire truck that we need to purchase in 2026. We're not using a tax note to purchase that truck because we were sensitive to the increase in tax rate already. So we're looking to do, it's called a lease purchase for that fire truck. That way we don't have to unload $1 million of cash all at once. We can just do it over a 5-year lease. Another part of the tax rate that I just wanted to bring to council's attention, this just compares last year's property values to the current year property values. As you can see, the overall property values increased 6%, which is great. The problem is that the amount that's frozen for seniors, that went up 17.42%, which leaves this middle ground here. This amount's not subject to the freeze. That's the only part that we can increase 3.5% a year without voter approval, and that increase was only 3.79%. If you translate it, if there was no freeze on those properties for 65 and older, it would have generated an extra around $630,000 of property tax revenue, which is equivalent to right at 2.7 cents in your property tax rate. Okay, we talked about the two major sources of revenue in the general fund. Now I'd like to go over the major, it's the largest expense by far in the general fund, payroll. Payroll is 75% of the general fund's expenditures, and it makes sense because it's basically service oriented, not product. So police and fire, for example, police and fire is 58% of your general fund's operational budget. Police and fire normally are ran 90% payroll. So again, payroll for the general fund is about 75%. The reason why I have this slide on here is because one of the manager's objectives of the city is to recruit and retain good staff. So we wanted to show you the turnover rate for the last couple of years. So in FY23, the turnover rate was 22%. It dropped in 24 to 20%, and it substantially dropped more in FY25. So far, it's only at 16%. And I'll show you in a slide coming up. I think part of the reason is because for the first time last year, the city had decent raises for staff. This is just an FYI, historical employee increases. So you can see in fiscal year 20, staff got nothing. CPI was 1.4%. In 2020, it looks like there was a compensation study. So they did get a raise that year. I wasn't here, so I don't have the details. CPI was 7%. In 22, staff got a 1% raise built into their salary, while CPI was 6.5%. In 23, staff got one-time retention bonus checks, so that's not built into their salary. They don't carry that over year to year, so that's a one-time payment when CPI was 3.4. In 24, another 1% raise for staff, and then police and fire had a step plan introduced, while CPI was 2.9%. And like I said on the last slide, last year the city manager was able to work out decent salaries increases for employees. It was 2 to 5% based on salary thresholds. It was tiered, 3% for fire and 7.7% for the police department. And a lot of that was basically they were just having a really tough time recruiting and needed to get their bottom salary at least to $60,000 to get any traction, so that had to be done. CPI was 2.8%. This year, and I have a slide to break it down a little further, we're suggesting a 3% raise for employees making less than $62,500 a year and a 2% raise for employees making more than $62,500 a year. How does that hit the general fund? That's going to cost $475,000. That includes payroll taxes and pension expense. Your utility fund, that's going to add $75,000 to it. Sanitation, $37,000. Airport, $5,000. And these numbers are already built in to the budget that's been proposed that you received over the weekend, and that we'll talk about in the future on that too. Other items that are already included in the proposed budget that you received, there were many requests for additional employees. We narrowed it down to what we absolutely needed. One of them was a code enforcement officer that comes at a cost of $60,000. And then we're converting one part-time employee in animal control to full-time, so that differential is going to be $28,500. So how does the general fund look now since last time we've met with all of these updates in here? I'll just skip to your operating income. Your operating income now is right over $1 million. And as you know, that's a city charter requirement. You have to have a positive operating income. Now remember, $500,000 of that is one-time money that was from ARPA funds that were held in another fund that earned interest that we wanted to transfer over to the general fund to help out the reserves, because the reserves is what funds your future capital needs and capital improvement plan where bonds aren't used. So it saves the taxpayers by not having to raise rates by issuing additional bonds. So we thought that was prudent. If we look forward 1 year to FY27, we have an operating income projected to be $365,000, so that meets the charter requirement, and we have excess reserves of $4.5 million. These numbers are based on these assumptions. Last time we met, before changes were made, this reserve was at 3 million. So we've done a lot to shore that up for future needs. If you look out one more year to FY '28, same process, $312,000 operating income, that meets your charter requirement. Excess reserves at the end of '28, $221,000. Last time we met, you had ran out of reserves in 2028. And that's not an alarm. Reserves are meant to be spent for capital needs. It's just that when you do run out of reserves, you're gonna have to start borrowing money again instead of cash funding it. Your utility fund didn't change much since last time we met. We just basically threw the raises in there. You have an operating income of 2.5 million, and then ending cash that's over your reserve requirements, $918,000. Now, even though this operating income is nice, your operating cash is decreasing each year. But we're hoping that since council adopted the 5-year rate increases into the ordinance last year, that those rate increases will help maintain your operating cash that's in excess. And as you know, that excess came in quite handy when we had to issue revenue bonds, because we have $100 million of capital projects in the water and sewer fund, and we're able to cash fund that with almost $40 million in cash. So that saves your users a lot of interest, because we're only having to issue $60 million of bonds instead of $100 million. So again, there will be, just a reminder to the citizens and council, there will be a 5.41% rate increase on your water and sewer. And for an average residential person that uses 4,000 gallons of water a month, that's gonna be basically $2.58 more on your water bill. Sanitation fund, same thing. We have an operating income of $1.9 million, excess cash above our reserve of $2.4 million. And just for the citizens' information and a reminder to council, you know, we had the rate study on water and sewer. We also had the rate study on sanitation. So the rate increase for trash pickup was recommended 4%. So for the residential person out there, that's 99 cents a month. And then also there's a 9% rate increase for basically your roll-off dumps at the landfill. Both of those increases were needed. The sanitation fund hasn't had rate increases in many, many years prior. So that'll help out with basically landfill improvement projects going forward also, because those are very costly. The next two slides I'm going to hand over to Jessica. She's over our Parks and Recreation Department, and this relates to that last bullet point on the city manager's objectives and priorities.
Mayor, Council, Jessica Sal, Community Services Director. This is essentially the last portion of that new special event permit process and ordinance that we've talked about at length. The last time we spoke, we had updated the ordinance and the guidelines to reflect that city partnered events were the events that could close down public streets, have city services. And so we wanted to go through some of the city events that are hosted by the city, and then ones that we are acting as partners already. So you can see a list here. These events are events that are hosted either by a city department or with an organization that we already have an affiliation through some sort of agreement, like our farmers market. We have a lease agreement with them. The Mayor's Committee for People with Disabilities is a city-appointed board. So these are all events that already appear in our city budget. They may not be called out in each department, as far as library may not have expenses that say Dia de los Muertos, but they have staff time. They have advertising budget for it, and so these are already in our budget. Our next slide, these are our proposed city partnered events. These events, we are essentially acting as partners already. You can see things like Kite Fest, Blueberry Festival, the Juneteenth Parade. The city is already working these events, so they are in our city budget. Again, not called out, but in staff time. Whether it's normal time, like for Blueberry Festival, our parks guys are going to mow the park either way. So it's normal staff time, but we also have some overtime in there for some of these events that the city is already covering. So again, these aren't officially lined out, but we are acting as de facto partners as of right now. And so if the council does approve these proposed city partnered events, we would continue acting as normal. These events would have to pay the base event permitting fee. For example, I think Blueberry Festival would have to pay between $250 and $300 just for that administration fee. So they would still be able to take place. They would be able to close city streets, and they could still act as we are doing today. There is also an option for the city manager to forgive those administration fees if he so chooses. But that would allow city staff to still work on these events, still dedicate city time and staff to it, and they would be part of our budget as part of our priorities. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, so what's next? So tonight in our regular meeting, you're basically going to receive the budget, and then we'll need to set a budget hearing. So we'll walk through that during the meeting. And then September 2nd, we're proposing to have the public hearing on the budget. And then state law says after you have a public hearing on a budget, you got to take action. My recommendation is going to be postpone approving the budget until we have the property tax rate hearing. And that'll be scheduled for September 16th. And then after that after that tax rate hearing, then we can adopt the tax rate and the budget at the same time. And remember, when you take your record vote tonight on the tax rate, it's the proposed tax rate. You're not setting the rate tonight. You're just proposing a maximum rate that you can consider in the budget. And that's all I have. Welcome your questions.
Any questions?
A couple. I just wanted to point out one thing. If you could go back to the slide that had the years, I wanted to point out something about 2024 on our taxes.
Oh, okay, here?
Yeah, right. If you look at 2024, and this influences my decision about the maximum tax rate and about what we need to be doing. If you look, that drop in 2024 was not an intentional drop at the time. It happened because the taxes were being proposed at a certain rate, but they included the certificates of obligation. And even though the city manager was advised not to depend on those going through because there was a petition being circulated, the whole tax rate was based on that. And that's why there's a drop. And it really did hurt because we are limited in the, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but we're limited in the amount of taxes and the tax increase. So that drop really did set the city back quite a bit because we had a pretty frugal budget to begin with. So I just wanted to.
Yeah, and I would
point
agree
that out.
completely, because dropping that tax rate sets your base lower.
Right.
And so you have a lower compounding effect on that base going forward.
That's right. So I wanted to point that out. I also had a couple of questions. They weren't on anything you talked about, but I wanted to also point out that I wanted to be sure, I know this is a minor detail, but the street maintenance fee, we actually have that in every bill, and I want to make sure that we know that those streets that are being, those streets are being repaired because of that $5.
Right, I
Would you like
believe
to
we
speak
get
to
about
that?
$750,000 a year
That's
on
right.
street maintenance fees, and it goes into a dedicated fund
Right.
only for the use of streets. Now, they're kind of banking some of that money right now because we got $10 million of bond money to spend for streets, but
Okay.
all of that money is banked and dedicated only to street maintenance.
So I think there's a requirement, or there was a promise made that the streets that those dollars would be going to would be shown, which streets were fixed for that $750,000. And so they have appeared in the past, but I wanted to make sure we knew that.
That would probably be a Mike New or Case Opperman question,
And
but
if you don't know it right now,
No,
yeah,
I
it's
think,
case.
I mean, if we're talking about prior promises versus charter versus budget, I want to let Kay speak to it.
Yeah,
You also have the prioritization, I think you also, probably, there's some blending, I would assume, and I'll let Kay speak to that, of assumptions prior to the bond approvals and having that running list of streets, and then also trying to coordinate projects logically, so.
Yep. Mayor, City Council, Case Opperman, Director of Public Works, City Engineer. What, could you, was there a question?
So there is
Specifically?
sort of a question, and the question is, are we still dedicating it, or is that just kind of, when that $5 came about, and I've had a number of people still talk to me about that $5, because they want to be sure that, I think it's $5, isn't it? I could be wrong.
It's $5 for residential, and
Yeah,
that,
right.
you know, for commercial and industrial, it's different.
And it wasn't supposed to
Couldn't
just,
quote which amounts they are right now, but I know for five for residential.
so it wasn't supposed to go to, just to our normal, it was supposed to up the number of streets, and there was supposed to be this was my understanding when I stepped into this position, that, you know, it identified the streets that were being repaired by the.
We keep track of which streets are paved with that money. Now,
Okay,
again, on a normal year, we've got $250,000 in the CIP just account
Right,
for,
right, right.
for street maintenance, and then we have the $750,000 for street maintenance as well in a different account. And we keep track, in our budget, or in our project budget
Okay.
of which streets are repaired with each, and we do that by, you know, where we pay the invoices out of.
And
Great.
the other thing I'd add
They
is,
are
they
allocated.
prioritize based on pavement conditions. So, that list probably will change over time.
That's fine.
Is what I'm
That's-
gonna say,
That's what it's supposed
is-
to.
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we have, because the next time I'm asked, I know I'm gonna be
Yeah,
able to.
it's really an accounting function
Right,
on our
refer them
end.
to you.
Yeah, well, I can tell them exactly which streets have been paved with the street maintenance fee.
And I actually think we've done, obviously, as you know, we've done, you know, far and above the work and what was dedicated, because we now have the bonds and we've dedicated other resources to it. But thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, we,
I will
we
be
do,
asked.
we do have tabs on which streets are fixed with it,
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
Just a quick addition to that, the ordinance in section 106-753 says that an annual report of the roadway maintenance fund and the roadway maintenance fee program will be provided to the city council.
Right. And
So-
that's what we've been doing in the past, so.
So that's,
That's the source, the ordinance, yeah.
yeah, so just an annual report on those things, and you've been doing that, so.
Speaking of which, it'll come later this year,
Yep.
so.
Good.
For the current year, yes.
Glad we reminded you.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Kathleen, do you have any other questions?
I had a question on the hotel taxes, if we have time for it, the hot taxes. Sometime, and maybe this is something we can have in the future, but there's just a larger amount about what is being collected and what's being proposed in the budget, and I'm just curious what, eventually, it doesn't have to be tonight, what those hot taxes are going for. I know there's almost 800,000, and then there's capital outlays and for Zion Hill, and I know some of that we'll be talking about in the next meeting.
And I know Ashley's been waiting on a quorum. I know she's had
Right,
some, but we will be,
yeah.
she here, again, my head only spins when I'm possessed, so let me see.
You don't have to answer it
Oh,
now, it
sorry.
just, or you can.
So I'll answer part of it, but not all of it, because I just want to clarify that we only receive 72.5% of the funds. So I do know that there have been some late payments from a hotel, which may account for the increased amount. And that's where I'll let Todd or if either of y'all want to step in and talk about that. But yeah, we're just remaining conservative with our budget because even though the funds are larger, hotel occupancy has been trending downward for the entire year. We've only had 1 or 2 months where it was positive, and so we don't want to budget for money that might not come in. But we're always on a delay with the city. So we receive our funds usually a quarter late, and so we're not always sure exactly like which months account for which, if that makes sense.
Right.
Well, the other thing is, there are, I mean, statewide,
Restrictions.
nationwide, that the hotels, that's why, as an example, I hate to use Galveston, like the Airbnb business that exploded is, you know, that's why there's probably like 2,000 houses for sale in Galveston now, because they were converted during the peak of COVID when people were doing that, and now no one's staying in them, in a town that has, you know, 5,000 to 6,000 hotel rooms. So I think there is some, I think people are holding back a bit on different things, and we'll see how the balance of the year goes. But and we did address I know it separately, not in here, some of the late payment from some of the payers recently.
Okay. Those are most of my questions, and any other questions I can ask you at a later time. They're delving into a little more detail, and they won't affect my vote today, so.
Anybody have any other questions? Well, I guess this concludes this. Are we done? Okay, all right, okay. We will stand adjourned until the 5:30 meeting.